The boardroom on the 42nd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows, and on clear days, you could see all the way to the harbor. Daniel Carter never looked at the view. He stood at the head of the table with his jacket buttoned and his hands flat on the glass surface. And he looked only at the numbers projected on the wall. Meridian Health Group. Q. 3 projections. Acquisition pipeline. 17 hospitals across 6 states, and every single one of them bled money somewhere that Daniel intended to stop. The Eastbrook facility is underperforming by 14%, he said. Cut the administrative overhead by 1/3 and restructure the nursing rotation schedule. The CFO, a heavyset man named Warren Holt, shifted in his chair. That's going to create some friction with the union rep, then manage the friction. Daniel picked up the presentation remote and advanced the slide. Next item. No one argued. That was the thing about Daniel Carter. He was 38 years old, worth somewhere north of $2 billion depending on market fluctuation, and he had not raised his voice at anyone in a professional setting in over 5 years. He did not need to. His voice was always the same, measured, low, absolute. When he said something, it was simply done. The question of whether people liked it had long since ceased to be relevant. He had not always been this way. There had been a time Warren Holt, who was old enough to have overlapped with that era, sometimes alluded to it carefully in the way people allude to weather patterns that no longer apply when Daniel Carter had been different, when he had arrived at meetings with coffee for other people as well as himself, when he had stayed after the numbers were done and asked after people's children and vacations and minor surgeries. That man was gone. Not dead, exactly. More like a room in a house that had been closed off and carpeted under and drywalled over so thoroughly that you would need a blueprint to find the door. The nickname had started somewhere in the middle years. Nobody claimed credit for it, which was how these things worked in corporate culture. One day it simply existed. The machine. His executive assistant, Priya Okafor, who had been with him for 4 years and was excellent at her job precisely because she never tried to warm him up, had overheard it once in the elevator and told him directly. That was the only reason he knew. He had not reacted. That, too, was on brand. After the meeting, he took the elevator down alone, as he preferred. The ride lasted 40 seconds. He spent them checking his phone, 2 missed calls from his general counsel, a briefing memo from his VP of operations, and a calendar reminder that he had a site visit scheduled at Street Cora's Medical Center that evening. Street Cora's. The newest jewel in the Meridian crown, or it would be, once they finished the acquisition. It was a private hospital in the downtown medical district, mid-sized, respected in cardiac care. Daniel had been overseeing the integration personally, which was unusual. His CFO thought it was because the deal was sensitive. That was not the reason. The real reason was that Catherine had died at Street Cora's 5 years ago, on a Tuesday in March. At 11:47 in the morning, his wife of 9 years had taken her last breath in a room on the 7th floor, while Daniel held her hand and did not cry because she had asked him not to. She had said, "I don't want that to be the last thing I see." So he had held it together. He had smiled. He had told her she was the best person he had ever known. And she had squeezed his fingers once, and then she was gone. He had not cried since. He had not laughed since, either. He had simply continued. Built the company. Closed deals. Bought hospitals. Filled the hours until they accumulated into years, and the years arranged themselves into something that looked, from the outside, like a life. The penthouse on Hargrove Street was silent when he returned that afternoon. He had 1,100 square feet of custom kitchen, and never cooked. He had a terrace with a view of the whole city, and never sat on it. There were no photographs on the walls. There had been, once. But he had taken them down 18 months after Catherine died. Not in grief, but in an attempt at practicality that had turned out to be its own kind of grief. He ate a prepared meal from the delivery service Priya had set up for him. He reviewed 2 contracts. He changed into a fresh shirt, because he always wore a fresh shirt. And then he drove himself to St. Cora's Medical Center at 9:15 in the evening to walk the East Wing and review the integration report in person. He liked hospitals at night. He would not have admitted it to anyone, but it was true. There was a quality to the silence, not empty, exactly, dense. The weight of all the invisible effort of keeping people alive while the rest of the city slept. The night administrator met him at the entrance and walked him through 2 floors of status updates. Daniel asked precise questions and received precise answers and made 2 notes in his leather-bound notebook. By 11:30, the administrator had been dismissed, and Daniel was alone in the East Corridor with his notebook and his cold coffee from the nurse's station. He was reviewing an HVAC report on his phone. He was about to leave, and then he heard music. It was barely music. The volume was so low it might have been imagined a piano line, something without lyrics, cycling softly through what sounded like controlled grief. Daniel stopped walking. The sound came from around the corner. The corridor here was a dead-end supply closets, a staff bathroom, a service exit that was never used after 10. There was no reason for anyone to be there. He turned the corner anyway. She had her back to him. She was in scrubs, dark green, slightly wrinkled, the kind of wrinkled that meant she had been in them for more than 12 hours. Her dark hair was pulled up in a bun that had partially come loose on one side, and she had her phone propped against the windowsill, and she was dancing. That was the only word for it, and it was completely inadequate. She was moving through something that was not quite any recognizable style, not ballet, not contemporary, not the kind of dancing people did at parties. It was private, unperformed. Her arms moved slowly. Her head tilted back, and there was something in the line of her body that made Daniel think of a person holding themselves together through sheer physical effort, like she was afraid that if she stopped moving, she would dissolve. He stood very still. He had not been moved by anything in a long time. He had watched a great deal happen without reaction: negotiations, funerals, his own company stock dropping 14 points in a single session. He had stood in the room where his wife died and felt his whole world restructure itself around an absence, and he had continued standing, but he stood in this corridor and felt something shift. He didn't understand it. He was, above everything, a man who needed to understand things. He watched her move in the half-light and felt a sensation he could only describe, distantly, as ache, as though something long calcified in his chest had developed a hairline crack. Then she turned. She saw him. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. Her face was startled, caught, and her eyes were wet. She had been crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just the kind of quiet crying that happens when you've been doing it for so long that the tears come without prompting, like weather. Then she grabbed her phone from the windowsill, and she walked very quickly past him without speaking, and she was gone. Daniel stood in the empty corridor for a long time. The faint ghost of the piano still seemed to hang in the air, though her phone was with her, and the music had stopped. He left the hospital at midnight, which was later than he had intended. He did not sleep well. He told himself it was due diligence. Meridian Health Group owned St. Cora's, which meant Daniel Carter had access to every personnel file in the building. It was not, technically, unusual for him to review them. He reviewed all manner of things. He had a reputation for granular attention to operational detail. He searched the staff directory for women in green scrubs assigned to the East Wing night rotation. There were 4. He narrowed it by the approximate age he had estimated: late 20s, maybe 30, and cross-referenced with scheduling data to find who had been on shift that night. 2 names. He eliminated one based on the hair in the file photograph. Her name was Dr. Emily Hartwell, 29 years old. Born in Dayton, Ohio. Completed her residency at St. Cora's 8 months ago, and had been retained on staff as a second-year resident in internal medicine. Her file noted an exceptional record: rarely sick, never late, consistently rated highly by supervising physicians. The notation in the margin of her last performance review, handwritten by the department chief, Dr. Marcus Reed, read, "Hartwell works harder than anyone I've ever supervised. I've told her to go home. She stays anyway." There was no emergency contact listed. The field was blank. Hospitals required it. The field was blank anyway, which meant either she had entered a name that had since become invalid, or she had left it empty on purpose. Daniel noted this with more attention